Welcome back. If you're here, this means that you have your MySQL Workbench application up and running and successfully connected into your database. The first thing that we're going to do here, and really what this video is all about, is how we are going to be creating tables so that you can set up your first table, get familiar with the interface, and figure out some of the elements and columns and data types that we need to be aware of when setting up our tables. We're not going to go through all of them. The book will detail more of them, and of course you can go online. It will reference more on like W3 Schools and php.net, but we will go through some of the basics that you are likely to use most often. So here I am in MySQL Workbench. I actually already have my connection open, so you can see I can tab back and forth from the home to my connection. Just a reminder, my VPN connection is still up, and I need to create a table. Well, let's get familiar with a few of the things that are on here. Some of them I'm just going to let you explore and familiarize yourself that way. But the first thing you need to know is down here you're going to see this thing called schemas. Now schemas are really just, that's your database. And it's been set up for you. You can see down here I have quite the list, and that's because I have access to everybody's database. You should just see your own. It's great because then you can get in, you can make sure that you're not going to be messing around with anybody else's, because not that I anticipate anybody doing that on purpose, but you know, we're all just learning this. So I'm going to go down, in my case, I'm going to go find my database. And you'll see underneath it, there's a few other elements. And this one, there's tables. That's the one we're going to be spending most of our time in. Views, stored procedures, and functions. And we're really not going to look at stored procedures and functions. That gets into more of the queries and ways of pulling up data. And we're going to be using our PHP to do that. If you look at tables, in my case, I've already created a table, but we're going to walk through how to create one together. And now let's just jump up to the top menu, and you're going to see some of these other little icons. So now that I'm in my database, you're going to see that you can create a new table in the active schema, which means when you have your database selected, you can go ahead and create a new table. So that's what we're going to do. So go ahead and click that. Here's our new table, and it's just simply called new table at the moment. So the first thing we have to do is give it a name. And the reason I like this application, to be truthful, I usually use one called PHP My Admin, but that one doesn't have some of the capabilities that we needed so that we could all access the database easily. But what I do like about this is it still has a nice visual interface, a graphical interface. It makes it a little bit easier to figure things out. So we're going to create this new table, and we're just going to call this contact _info. Then what's down below is we need to create columns, and those columns are what's going to store our data, and each column will hold a different data type. So we need to go in, and where it says click to edit, we need to add a data type. So I'm just going to click on it, and the neat thing is if I click to edit there, down here on this lower portion is where I can fill in information. So I'm going to give this a column name, because the first thing that we usually need to do, and is highly recommended in the vast majority of tables that you create, is to give it an ID. And so that's what we're going to do. And so I'm just going to call this contact ID. One of the things that you're going to read about in your book, and that I'm just going to advise you about now, is that underscores are the only other character allowed when creating column names. And you can use upper and lowercase, but I encourage you to keep it all lowercase. It just makes things a lot easier. So you can see I've called this one contact ID. We need to go in now. I'm just jumping over to this drop down. We need to select a data type. You'll see in this drop down there's lots of different types, and this is the stuff that the book has a really great table that goes through all of these different data types. For this, because it's an ID, we are just going to select the INT, which stands for integer. So then there's a couple things that we need to do because they're special to IDs. They need to be unique for one thing, and they're going to serve as what is referred to as the primary key. So along with the primary key, we're going to make it unique, and it needs to be what's referred to as not null. If we've left that blank, meaning this field could be null in this table, then it would not assign it any sort of number. And that's problematic when we're doing these primary keys, because each record in our table needs to be associated with a unique primary key. In other words, we cannot leave it as null. It has to have some sort of value assigned to it. So that's why we checked not null. And the other one that we need is auto increment. And what auto increment does is it will, instead of you having to individually go in and assign each element on your table, can you imagine Amazon having to go in and assign each one of the items that's in their store a primary key and having to remember which number they are in the database? So what this does is we let the computer do that job for us. This is our first column. I'm not going to put any other information in here. You could put some comments. Those are just for you. And once I'm done, I need to click apply. This window is going to pop up and it's going to tell you, and here is the SQL code. We only need to know some of this. We're not going to go into tremendous amount of detail in this because we're only covering MySQL for a couple weeks. It's creating the table in my Isaacson database
called contact info,
and it's creating a column called
contact ID
that it's using an integer. It's not null. It auto increments. It has a unique index and is the primary key. And we're going to click apply. It will apply that and it will tell you that everything is either good or bad. If it's bad, it means you have to close out of this and go back. You can't just simply go back here. You just need to close this window. Everything is good in this case, so I'm just going to hit close.
Okay, we've just finished adding our first column, which was that contact ID. Now let's go ahead and add the rest of our columns. And since this is a contact table, we're going to add a first name, a last name, and an email. These will be the 3 different columns that we are going to be adding in. There are a couple of ways that we can do this. Simply by going to this next row here and clicking edit, we can simply type information in here. So I'm going to call this first_name, and we can select, notice how it automatically went to this one called variable characters. And it says variable characters, and then in parentheses, it says 45. So that tells me how many characters that this will allow. Well, for a first name, I think that 45 is fine. We can always change it, but for right now, I'm going to leave that. We can also stay up here and check the different boxes that we need if we choose. So the first one, PK, is primary key. Well, this is not a primary key, so we are not going to check that. The second one says that it cannot be null. Not null is what NN stands for. In this one, it can be null. We don't care if there isn't a first name here. It's also not going to be a unique, which is UQ, so we're going to leave this be. Not going to worry about that one, or that one, or that one, but we will look at AI. That one stands for auto increment. We don't need this to auto increment, so we basically leave everything here blank. To add this column, I am now going to go down and click apply, and it's going to say I'm going to be altering the table, which is on the Isaacson DB, the database, in the contact info table, and it's going to be adding a column called first name that's variable characters, can be null. So I'm going to click apply, and it has been successfully added. So I'm going to close this. The second one, I'm going to go click to edit directly below it, but now I'm going to add it down here. So I'm just going to call this one last_name, and we can go and unclick all of these boxes because we don't need any of those. And I am going to click apply on this one, and it's going to do the same thing. It was successfully added. And the last one, which is going to be our email address. So I'm simply just going to call it email. Variable characters 45. I think that this one should probably be a little bit longer. You never know if you're going to have some ridiculously long email. I'm going to just double click on the where it says variable characters, and where it says 45, I am going to change that to 100 and then just click elsewhere, and notice now that it is saved. So now I'm going to go, after I've changed all of these things, I am going to go in and click apply, and it was successfully added. And so now I have my 3 columns. So I have the contact ID, which is a primary key. It cannot be null. It is unique, and it is auto incremented. I now also have the first name, the last name, and an email column. So this is all fine and dandy, but how do we actually add the information to this table? Well, now we need to go down under schemas on the left, scroll down to where you find yours, find tables, look for the table name. Now I have a number of tables in here. This will be your only table. So we will go into into contact info and see these three little icons that end up right next to it. The first one just simply provides you some information. The little wrench is the one that we are currently using. If you notice the icon up here, it basically tells us this is what we need to build the table. And the third one is a little table icon with a lightning bolt. That's the one we're looking for this. And this simply means this is where we can work in the table to provide content to it, whereas this means with the wrench working on it to create the table. So let's go find my contact info and click on that icon. We are now in the screen that's going to allow us to add some content to our table. What we're going to be paying attention to is down here in this portion where you can see each of the columns that I made. I have the contact ID column, the first name, the last name, and the email. We can actually enter our data right in here, but before we do that, let's take a look at some of these items over on the right hand side. We are currently what's called the result grid. Another way we can enter content is by clicking form editor. So we could simply go in here and we could add some information. In fact, let's go ahead and do that, and we're going to add our first name. So we're going to say Bilbo. We're going to go to the next one and we're going to give him an email address, bilbo@theonering.com. And when we are finished, we can click apply. You'll notice that it gives us this same kind of information that we were receiving before when we were creating the table. But now this is saying insert into the database. So in this case, my database, into the table called contact info. These are the names of the columns. So it's saying insert into the Isaacson DB database, into the table called contact info, into the column called first name, last name, email, the following values. And so you'll see that these are in the exact same order. So we have Bilbo Baggins and then the email address. And I'm seeing a space here, so I'm actually going to see if I can delete that. So that's gone. So then I'm going to click apply and it's going to tell me it was successful. And similar to before, if it was unsuccessful, it will try and give you some sort of a message. It'll be an error message that indicates where the error is. Sometimes they're still a bit cryptic to try and figure out. I'm going to go ahead and close this though, because this was successful. And so now if I go back to this result grid over on the right hand side, I will see that I have Bilbo Baggins and then the email. So let's just click this little vertical bar to open up some of these so that we can see them a little bit better. So that is one way in which we can actually enter info. The other, which is my preferred, is on this result grid page where we can come in and actually just enter some information. So I'm going to go in on this version and I am going to just click another couple of names just so we can start to fill this out. So I'm going to say Frodo Baggins. And we are going to say he is Frodo he's also going to be at theonering.com. And we'll put in one more and I'll do Samwise Gamgee we're going to put him at hobbitgardener.com. So I'm going to click apply. And you're going to see here are the two insert into statements. So it's really the same thing. It's saying into the Isaacson DB database, the table named contact info, the columns named first name, last name, and email, the following values. So it's going to input Frodo Baggins and his email address, Samwise Gamgee, and his email address. So we're going to go ahead and click apply. It says it was successful, so I'm going to hit close. And one thing I want you to notice is how the numbers here under the contact ID have automatically shown up. If you recall, this is because they're auto-incremented. We don't want to actually input each of these numbers. The computer does it for us. So at first, there aren't any numbers here. So if I want to go add another name to this, it's automatically going to become 4. So let's try and add that next name. So we're going to add Pip, which is Peregrine Took, and we are going to put him at ilovemushrooms.com. I'm going to apply this, and this will automatically fill in as number 4, because notice that it is saying it's currently null, but we've said that this cannot be null. So I'm applying, it says it was successful, and there it is, and it says number 4. Now, the interesting thing about these ID numbers is, remember, they have to be unique, which means if I were to delete one of these rows, that number would all by itself disappear, and the next item I would add would take the next number in the sequence, because 4 in this case would always be associated with Peregrine Took. So if I go and remove him, and in order to do that, I'm going to right click here and I am going to look for something that says to delete the row. So I'm going to delete that row, and now he is gone. So I'm going to click apply just to make sure. So delete from contact info. So I'm going to hit apply, close. All right, for sure he's gone. So let's add a new one. And I am going to now add Mary. So Maryadoc Brandy Buck at Mary at, I don't know, we'll just give him the local hobbiton.com. And I'm going to apply, and this should actually then become number 5. And here we are, 1, 2, 3, 5. And so the next number in that sequence would be 5. And that's how it would be if we continued to add on additional new rows. So now we have a table that, if I'm just going to pop over to this other tab that we built, that said we have an ID column that has a primary key. It cannot be null. It's unique, is auto-incremented. And then we have other columns that use this variable character. And we've left the first 2 at the default 45, and we've changed the last one to 100. All of these can be null, meaning we can leave them blank, and we have it called first name, last name, and email. Then we've gone in, I'm going to go to the other tab, and we've actually inserted data, which is really cool, but doesn't mean much if we can't do anything with it. So in the next video, I'm going to walk you through how we connect via PHP and our web page so we can pull this data out and display it. Thanks for watching.